Hello and welcome to another episode of Yalla, the podcast of Jewish students, brought to you by the Union of Jewish Students of the UK and Ireland. I'm Samantha, the Campaigns and Inclusion Sabbatical Officer.
And I'm Samantha from the University of East Anglia studying law. On today's episode of Yalla, we'll be talking with Irit, Gazit, an Israeli lawyer working for the Civil Commission on October 7th Crimes Against Women and Children at Dvorah Institute, which is leading the collection of testimonies from the victims of the October 7th attacks. This talk is part of UJS's 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. We want to thank UJS and the Jewish Agency for Israel for making it possible for Irit to be here today, as part of a tour she's giving for multiple day talks across the country.
Before we begin, it is important to provide a content warning that there might be conversations concerning violence against women and sexual assault. Feel free to stop listening if these sensitive topics make you feel uncomfortable. The UJS team and your sabbatical officer are here to give any support you may need, including the UJS hotline, which is available 24/7 and can be found on our social media. Irit, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We would love for you to sort of introduce yourself a little bit more, provide your background, what you do, and where you're working today.
Okay. Today I'm the director of the documentation unit in the Civil Commission on October 7th, and I'm a legal lawyer and professional, and I have expertise in representing victims, all kinds, sexual violence, and not only. I've been committed to social justice through all my career, through advocacy, legislation, and victim-centered legal support. At the Civil Commission, my job is to collect evidence and to document all evidence of the survivors of October 7th, families, Nova Festival, all of them, first responders.
So could you tell us a little bit about what the Commission is and what their main goals are?
We have three major aspects. One of them is the documentation, the second one is research, and the third one is advocacy. We understood that we have to document everything that happened on October 7th. At the beginning, the events were denied or looked over. Nobody understood or wanted to understand the major event that happened on October 7th. In Israel, we see it every day in television, but I'm not sure that the world understood, and the world was silent. The international feminist organization just kept silence. We approached them, we wrote for them, but there was no response for what happened to women and for all of us on October 7th. So we understood we have to document it. So it will be an evidence for the next generation to see what happened on October 7th, that no one will forget what happened. We remember the Holocaust, how important it was to document, to take testimonies, to understand what happened for the next generation to understand, because the survivors sometimes passed away and you have to keep the remember on so it won't happen again.
What motivated the establishment for the Commission? And you've talked a bit about why it's so crucial. If you could expand on that as well.
We understood that the international law has not enough tools to comprehend and to deal with what happened on October 7th. And we understood that things will go away and we have to start collecting them. I think October 7th was the most documented atrocities that ever happened. The terrorists themselves has GoPros on their head and they filmed it online, and they used media, the families, social media, and broadcast everything that happened on the same day. But we have to collect it, that it will be safe and will be for the next generation to see. And that it started from that. And then we going over all the materials, we understood that we see patterns, new patterns. They made families, they used families as weapon of war. They used the family bonds to make the suffer more concrete. They were cruel, and when you see your father or mother or child being killed or murdered or kidnapped, it's unbelievably suffer. So they used the family bond to increase the suffering. And then we looked for how to describe it. There is no definition for this crime. It's part of the crimes against humanity, but it's not, there was no term for this crime. And so we put a term for it. We called it genocide. Next of kin, so we took it genocide. It's part of the genocide and crimes against humanity, but we thought it need to be defined specifically. So it will be helpful for the victims to get justice, but it's very important to define it specifically, to see the pattern. There were specific patterns that were made for the families. They entered into the family's house. They went into the safe rooms, and then they murdered and kidnapped and injured family members, one in front of the other. So this was really unique in this. It maybe happened in other areas in the world, in other conflicts, but it never got a name for itself. So it's very known in law that you have to name it, and then you can claim it, and then you can blame someone, and then you can claim justice. So we thought it's the first stage is to name it, and we name it genocide.
Thank you. So obviously after October 7th, despite all the documentation, there still remained quite a lot of denial and skepticism about what actually happened. So how did the Civil Commission respond to that?
So we started to hear, I prefer the term hear evidence, not collect evidence, because I hear the evidence, but the evidence is the survivors, not mine. I'm here to hear and to document it, but this is their story, their narrative, and I keep it. We keep in our mind that this is their story, their narrative, and it should stay theirs. It's a national event, that's right. It's a national tragedy, right. But they are the people behind the tragedy. So this is their story, not mine. So our is very victim-centered approach. I give them the opportunity to talk about whatever they want in their own words. They choose the staff, the interviewers. If they want a man or a woman, they're there to choose. They can choose what time of day they want to give the testimony, where they want to give the testimony, who will be able to watch your testimony. And I think it's very important because if you hear it directly from the survivors, it's more effective than me talking about it. It's really important. It's very, very difficult to hear it every day, I have to say.
Sure.
The stories are shocking, but I think it's part of the recovery process, the survivors' recovery process, because after October 7, all the control of their life was taken from them very brutally. Someone entered their houses or went into the festival, took everything they could control, and they were helpless. The army didn't come. It took hours until someone came to help them. And by giving them the opportunity to tell their own story in their own words, I think I can give them to regain some sense of control over their life, and it's part of the really, really slow process of healing after what happened on October 7th. So for me, it's the most important things. I think you shouldn't treat them as, as a tool for me, for my research. They are the main goal. They are the most important part of what I'm doing is the survivors or the first responder who saw everything, and they are traumatized too. It's really hard to see those scenes after October 7. It was devastating. There were soldiers, paramedics, Zaka professionals. It was really, really hard for them to see what they saw on
sort of putting the power back into their hands, which I think is really important.
Yes, and in a safe environment. When you see them talking on the media, it's not a safe environment. And I understand the media. They need some juicy stuff. They need the details. But these people part of them are, they have family members still in captivity, and they are really want to talk because they think it might help bringing them back home. But I think we should be very we should look at them not as a tool for us to bring them back home, because looking back in 3 years from now, they might look at themselves and say, why did I appear like that? Why did I say it on TV? It's, you know, in these digital times, we have a digital body. What we say will stick with us forever, because whenever you Google us in 3 years, you will see what I said today. So we have to be very careful and let them talk about what they want to talk, and even if they give consent to give the interview, when they look back after that, maybe they will say, oh, I shouldn't do it, and I don't want them to be on this place. I want them to talk in a safe environment, and even if they talk to me and give the interview or the testimony, and after a day or two they call me and they say, Irit, I don't want you to use it, I want you to erase it, I will erase it. It's their story, not mine. I'm happy to make my research based on testimonies, but if someone tell me, you know, we are going to have a report now on the genocide. It's going to be published next week, and we mentioned some of the stories that I think most of us in Israel read. Most of the families already knows. We know the faces from the news and from the posters everywhere. And we use some of the families as to demonstrate what we want to say about the genocide. But before I use every family, I called them. I told them, I want to make an example by your story for my report, but I want to make sure you agree. Even though it was already in all medias and everywhere, I want to make sure you want it to be in my report. I'm not using your story unless you say, Irit, it's okay. So this is I think it's a victim-centered approach, and I think it's the most important things. We have to treat them with respect and make them gain something from the process too, not only me taking something from their testimony.
And how has then sort of the denial impacted both your work but also the people that you're hearing from?
I think in Israel it's very you always hear about October 7th. We are in the trauma. There are more than 100 people still in captivity, so we are still in the trauma. It hasn't over yet. It's still in, but I think in the larger scale in the world it's already finished, and I'm not sure everybody comprehends what really happened on October 7th. So the denial was devastating for us. You know, I'm a feminist. I used to work for a feminist organization called WIZO, Women International Zionist Organization, and I expected solidarity. And the denial and the silence were devastating. And that's why we wake up every morning and say, okay, this is our mission, to keep these stories alive, that no one can look away from them. If you hear a story after story after story, you cannot say it didn't happen, because these are people who didn't know each other before October 7th, and each and every one of them tell a very similar story about what happened to him on October 7th. So I hope it will help us fight with or deal with the denial, because it was really, we approached every international organization we knew, every UN organization, feminist organization, and where is it? And they were silent. It was really, I'm a lawyer, I am a law professional, I expected more than from my colleagues, but it was really, but it makes us more motivated to keep our work, because we cannot give up. It's our mission. I feel I'm a part of really important mission, to give a voice for those victims of October 7th.
Thank you.
So are there any specific elements that you're aiming to document throughout these interviews, and why those elements?
The commission is focused on women, children and families. So this is our main goal. But concerning sexual violence, we will document also if it was men want to. We know there were some sexual violence that was committed on men, not only women. So we will document it. But this is our focus. So that's what we are looking for. But before I started testimony, I'm reading everything I can about what happened to the person who's coming to give the testimony. But then I give him he's free to tell everything he wants to tell. I'm not asking leading question, because I hope that beside the fact that I'm documenting his evidence, maybe one day he will want to use this interview or this testimony in some tribunal to pursue justice in domestic tribunal or in international tribunal. So I want it to be in standards that can be in most compelling standard that he can use it for his own procedures. And I need to use it for my research, so it should be in a very high standards. But other than that, they can have free path to talk about everything they want. But this is my focus. It doesn't mean that what happened to men on these days or to the soldiers, it was less horrific. But the commission is focused on women, children and families and sexual violence.
It's clear that you and the commission take this incredibly seriously, and I wonder how these interviews impact you personally and the people around you. So how do you keep going, and what motivates you to continue doing what it seems to be such a challenging piece of work?
Always ask me, how can you do it day after day, hearing those horrific stories? I have to say, I think it's a mission. It's like all my life I was prepared to do this mission. I have to say that a year before October 7, I lost my husband. It was a big tragedy for me. And then I thought about and say, okay, it took me some time to regain and be back on my foot. But then I said, okay, I want to work in some place that will be happy, a happy place. I want some happy work. I always worked in the most difficult places, like domestic violence, sexual violence, people with disabilities, children at risk, all kinds of. And this time I want something happy. And then October 7 happened. And I work for AKIM. It's the Israeli national organization for people with disabilities, with intellectual disabilities. And it's a very important work. They need to keep their rights and to pursue justice for them. But after October 7, I felt that I can't go back. I have to do something concerning October 7. So that time I understood, bye-bye my plans for happy place and welcome commission, civil commission. And we cannot give up. It's not an option. We have to keep on going, but we get professional help. You cannot do it with and we got we invented our own practices to deal with this stuff. Like, I'm not watching the horrific footage and videos at home. I'm only in the office, usually not alone, and not in the dark hours, just in the morning, and few hours a day. The interviews are more, I am trying to do it according to the interviewee preference, but if I need to read something or watch something, I'm trying to do it in a specific hour so it won't mix house with work, and it's. But it's difficult. It's not easy. Not everybody is able to do it. I know. We had some volunteers. They were young, like your age, and after a few months they said, "Okay, I cannot do it anymore." I think something with the age make it maybe a little bit more easy, but it's difficult. We have sometimes, at the end of the day, we feel this day was too much for us, but we go back to sleep and then wake up in the morning and say, okay, it's an important job, we have to keep going. It's not an option, we cannot give up. And we have 101 people in captivity, so if some of the work helps them too, we did our job today.
Thank you for doing this important work. So I feel that everyone in Israel and in the diaspora could remember exactly where they were when October 7th took place. So could you share with us maybe where you were and what your immediate actions following when you found out?
Well, October 7th was Shabbat, and it was Simchat Torah, the last day of Sukkot. And we were home. I was with my daughter. She's a soldier, so she was at home. And then at 6:30, the sirens started, and we went to the safe room. And just after that, she began to get calls from her base that she needs to go back. She's in the Air Force. So we were trying to find someone to take her back to the base, because her base was in the south of Israel, and the terrorists were still in the south. She couldn't drive by herself, so we found someone to take her. And just after she left, I understood it's something that we never experienced before. And at the beginning, we were trying to help the soldier. We sent food and supplies, and everybody really volunteered. But after that, as the scope of the event started to get out, I understood I have to do something. I have to do something for October 7th, and then I started to look, where can I put in something that I have, where can I contribute the most? And Civil Commission was, I joined the Civil Commission a few months after October 7th, and from there until today I'm doing it, and I hope I'm doing something important. I think I do, but
you do, definitely.
You touched on this a bit earlier about sort of the media and how in the digital age we will have a digital body. I was wondering if you could share how media has shaped public perception about these events, and whether you found it more challenging in the digital age, or if it has been helpful to your mission.
The Israeli media, I think they're quite accurate about what happened in October 7th, and they are using the stories to get attention, and this is their job maybe. I think sometimes they could do much better, but it's not to me to judge. I'm doing my job. But I think what happened that just after October 7th, a lot of media channels and they all went down where the survivor, they were evacuated to hotels after October 7th, all the survivors. And all the media just jumped on them and took interviews and on and on and on. And sometimes they felt it's too much, and they are being used as, everybody's looking at them, and they are just got out of the trauma, some of them without their clothes, and just got some clothes that good people gave them, but they were like, and then they started to give interviews, and when you ask them today to give another testimony, they say, why should I? I already gave a few interviews in the media. Take one of them. Why do you need something for yourself? So I never force them to give a testimony. I prefer, if they don't want to give me, I said, never mind, I will take something from the media. It's not good because it wasn't made for research purposes or for justice tribunals, but if that's what it is, that's what it is. I won't force them to give me testimony. But I don't know how the media international, I think that it's not in the media anymore. I guess it stopped being interesting for the international media. And I think that's why I'm here. I'm here because each and every one of you can be our ambassadors to keep those stories alive and share them and share what happened on October 7th. I cannot say, people in Israel say it's another Holocaust. It's a different Holocaust, but it's a major trauma and a major tragedy, and we have to keep going on talking about it so it won't happen again, because we promised it won't happen again after the Holocaust, and we didn't keep our promise. So I hope this time we will be able to keep our promise that it won't happen again.
So do you believe there's been a gap between the education and advocacy regarding the events that took place?
I think it wasn't. Yes, I think there is a gap. The events were really horrific, really, and I don't think it's got outside of Israel. It didn't get the scope of the event, the gravity of the event. I don't think it's got through too effectively. I think it took some time and I think until today, not all the survivors are ready to talk about what happened to them. I think the stories are going to get out even a few years from now. It takes some time, specifically in sexual violence. We know that victims of sexual violence take a lot of time until they are ready to talk because of the stigma, because it's not really convenient to talk about what happened to you when that you were a sexual violence victim. So it takes time, and they are in the trauma now, and it's very hard for them to talk about it. So I think even us don't know how horrific it was really. So it will take time until we know everything. Maybe we will not know everything forever, because some of the victims cannot speak. They are not alive. They are dead, so they cannot speak for themselves. So we are the voice of the victims. We have to be their voice. Victims, the dead ones, and the survivors. And it's our mission to keep talking about it and keeping it in the mind of people, so really everybody understand that it was something, it was unusual. It happened in other conflicts. I understand, the Yazidis in Iraq and Ukraine, you can find horrific events like that in those areas too, but all of us, the Yazidis and the Ukrainians and the Israelis, have to keep talking about it, because we have to keep it alive, and it's really important for us.
Thank you. So do you think talking about it is the main way in which we can close that gap and ensure that victim stories are properly heard?
By offering the genocide, for example, we think it will help pursue justice for the victims, and we would like to think that the international law will adapt itself for this crime, and that we will be able to make the terrorists account for what they do. So we are not only talking about it, we are advocating for that too. But I think talking about it, and we cannot let people forget what happened on October 7th. And the best way is to talk about it and keep it alive. Not, okay, it was done, okay, we are going away with our life. Because there is a lot of tragedies all over the world, I understand. But this one is a very unique, and I think we should keep on talking about it.
So you sort of touched on a lot of different methods and techniques and advocacy ways in terms of how you document what you've had. What are some of the most effective methods that you see in terms of putting what you've had into your research and into society?
We have an archive and we document everything, photos, videos, testimonies, everything we can. We collect from other projects, other initiatives. We have some cooperation and we document everything, and we hope it will be good for other research, not only our research. Researchers from all over the world will be able to approach our archive and make research in all aspects they can think about it. Think about the Holocaust. A lot of research were done on Holocaust, like art during the Holocaust and social aspect of the Holocaust, and you name it, historical aspect of Holocaust. So we hope our archive, it's a very, we are doing it under the most compelling standards we can find. Our head of the archive used to be the deputy manager of the Yad Vashem archive, and she has a lot of experience, advocate Elinor Corridoro, and we are hoping that it will help other researchers with their research.
So while you're speaking to these victims, I'm sure a lot of it is extremely heavy, but have you seen any moments of like hope and resilience in these victims?
I have to say that some of them are talking about going back to their houses, to their communities, and wow, it's really inspiring, because people have gone through hell, and Israel failed them, the army failed them, all of us failed them in some way. Their dreams about peace crashed, but they are talking with such hope for the future. So it's really inspiring, I have to say. They are my motivation. I wake up every day, and I really they are the reason I'm keeping on going, doing it. And I don't know. I hope I'm doing a good job, but really, they're amazing. They're amazing people, really amazing people, and their willingness to share their stories. It's not easy to sit in front of a camera and to give the interview. It's really going back over and over the stories, and it's really hard. But at the end, most of them say it helped them. And my colleague interviewer, she is a therapist. We are doing the interview in a co, and we are trying to, at the end, to make them feel that the interview gave something for them too. Not we don't use them. We give them something back to go after the interview. So I hope we are doing a good job. I always call them after the interview to see if everything is okay, if it went well. If they tell me, well, I need this kind of help, or I need some legal aid, or I'm trying to connect them with the right organization to help them in a way I cannot. I'm really trying to see them and to understand what they need and to give them what they need, as much as I can, of course. I cannot give them back October 6th, but I'm doing my best to help them.
You are doing incredible work, and it's incredibly important, and we are forever appreciative that you've come today to speak with us and talk to students. Just to end on a final note, what are those key messages or goals that you've sort of spoken about today that you want to share within your work and just to the students watching?
I want to ask that whenever you invite a survivor or victim, or see them, look at their eyes and hug them and respect them and respect their stories. Don't look over them, don't use them. And the other thing, I think, and every one of us have a mission to talk about it as Jewish people, as Israelis, as students, hello students, human beings, women, all of us. We have to talk about it and keep those stories alive and keep it at everyone's minds that what happened on October 7th cannot happen again, this time for real. So each and every one of us have a role in this mission. And you can do it too. You don't have to be me for this. You can talk about it with your colleagues and your friends and your family. Just share with them what happened, and together we will do it. Keep on alive.
That brings us to the end of today's episode of Yalla, the podcast of Jewish students.
We would like to thank Irit again for sharing with us about her important work since October 7th. We would like to thank UJS and the Jewish Agency for making Irit's visit to the UK possible, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in.
If you found this episode interesting, be sure to subscribe and share it with others who are interested in creating a safer world for us all.
You can follow UJS on all the socials and UJS_UK for updates on future episodes, events and opportunities.
If anything in this podcast or events on campus have been triggering, don't forget that UJS's 24/7 dedicated welfare support line is open. You can call us on 020 742 43281 to speak to one of our experienced staff or volunteers.
Don't forget to tune in next time to hear more incredible stories and meet some amazing people on Yalla, the podcast of Jewish students. But for now, goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. See you on campus soon.